Now, here's the thing, just like songwriters or composers will sometimes try to second guess what will sell. And you know what? That never works because you have to stay true to yourself, and that's the most important thing. Hi, I'm Robert Estrin, and you're watching Living the Creative Life.
Robert, welcome onto my show. I've known about your channel for a long time. I have many colleagues and friends who grew up watching your many videos. At the time that we're speaking, you have about 1,400. You have...
That's right.
What is that? Nearly 30 million views.
Being in 21st century America, classical piano is irrelevant to a lot of people's lives, but by casting a wide net, I'm able to connect with people who love the piano as I do, and that is very gratifying. Hello, I'm Robert Estrin. Some of you may know me from my videos, livingpianos.com and YouTube.
This is a channel on which you host what kind of content for your over 110,000 subscribers right now, which is the envy of many serious channels in the classical music world?
Well, I have a very wide range because, with, as you say, over 1,400 videos, there's always new topics. And the most remarkable thing is I have a document with suggested topics. Whenever I think of a topic, wherever I am, I'll whip up my phone and go to my Google Drive and put the topic in there. So I probably have 100 new topics that I haven't done yet on there. And they're inspired, a lot of them are inspired from my students and such. So they range from piano instructional type of videos, not going through a piece note by note, but more like concepts of whether it's how to deal with expression or something of that nature, or technical challenges, but also piano videos about the construction of pianos, because I also am involved with pianos as well as piano playing.
So I'm curious to break this down in terms of how you perceive your musical balance. Being a pianist, making all these videos, producing and editing them, you teach over 30 students, and you're selling pianos.
Well, growing up, I always had a lot of interest, but a real passion for music. But my father, although he was professor of music at Hofstra University, he did the lion's share of his teaching in a very large studio in the back of our home where he had 2 grand pianos and theory classes and recitals. So I was intimately involved with my father's students. And many of them were incredibly accomplished, more so than I was. I've always had very small hands, and as a kid, my hands were very weak and with spaghetti fingers, and even reaching an octave, even at the age of 13, it was a struggle. So in terms of, goals, I wasn't like a child prodigy, but, I always felt music would always be a part of my life, but I didn't have any specific career ambitions. All I knew was I love to perform. Performing has always been a passion of mine, and trying to figure out, how to incorporate that into a life, into a career, of course, took many decades to figure out one path. And for many, many years, it always seemed like there was an inverse proportional relationship between what was rewarding financially and what was artistically rewarding. I started teaching in high school, assisting my father in his teaching, as my sister did before me, and she's incidentally a pianist and a teacher right here in the Cleveland area, which we can get into as well. But I knew that I did not want to just teach. Mm-hmm. And yet, when I graduated from conservatory, what was the obvious thing? I had been teaching since high school, and my part-time job going through college was teaching. So that's how I made my living initially. But I had so many other interests. So I expanded into a recording studio, which I put in my lower level of my home, and I did music production and composing for film and video, and I just always was expanding and expanding and expanding for a long, long time. But it wasn't, ultimately gratifying. I tried to figure out what could I possibly do in order to further my performing, and that's when I came up with Living Piano. I go from 3 distinct periods: the ultimate harpsichord, the earliest piano that really was catching on, and then the modern piano. And I performed that dozens of times all over the state of California. And that was a way that I was able to promote my performing while bringing something that's more than just another performance. It's something you could talk about, and I got written up in papers and blogs, and because it was something fresh and new in music and with the piano, which is really a challenge. And that's really when I kind of turned the corner. And, I actually started making piano videos in the late 90s. A company in Irvine called Digivent engaged me along with a guitar and drum show, Keyboard Kaleidoscope, and I did 50 shows. They were 1 hour live internet shows, cutting edge for the time, that I did for a year, every week, and did many different topics, and yet it didn't take off. It was really, they ended up getting sold to another company, and they never could get traction with these live events. They engaged us to do these shows, but it was a pitifully small audience. And I think it was because most people didn't have the high-speed internet to be able to enjoy it and to partake in such a thing. But by the late early 2000s, the internet was working for people, and broadband was now becoming more ubiquitous. And I always loved to make videos anyway, so I just started making them, and I kind of went all in on it. And I little by little, first I engaged a young man who was a friend of my daughter's, who had just graduated from film school at Chapman University. And he wanted to do a showcase of his talent. And so he made a documentary of my living piano journey through time historic concert experience. And from there, little by little, he started doing more and more for me with my website. And until he ended up being full-time, and Living Piano grew into Living Pianos, because I had always been selling pianos from the time I graduated from conservatory. Because of teaching, students would call me for lessons, and the first question I'd ask is, do you have a piano? And half the time they would say no, and I would tell them honestly, you're better off with a piano and no lessons than lessons and no piano. So that's when I started, looking for pianos I could have refurbished and sell. And it was such a big demand for this that I just always had extra pianos in my home. We ended up with this big live-work loft with dozens of pianos. And so that always grew.
That's a question of balances that I'm wondering about. So with the video production that you're describing, let's say one of your viewers, one of your subscribers wants to do a similar channel. Would they have to have, like you did early on, have help with technology, or would they have to learn how to do all of that themselves and buy all the equipment?
Technology has come a really long way. It used to be, a formidable job just to, have a halfway decent camera. But today, the latest generations of phones, if you have a high-end phone, the video quality is what exceeds what professional quality was not that many years ago. Of course, educating yourself about the importance of lighting and dealing with audio appropriately. There's a knowledge that one has to gain in order to do it, but it's not insurmountable to be able to do your own video production and even video editing in today's world.
So let's talk about education now, because you told me something astonishing, which is that of your students, you've actually only met 2 of them.
That's right. I teach online. I've got a great setup and phenomenal students all over the world. Matter of fact, my next student today is in Australia, where it will be tomorrow morning. And then I have students in Israel, Pakistan, the Dominican Republic, Alaska. And it's enriching to have students from such a wide backgrounds and cultures. And my setup is great because I have a big screen TV where I see them almost like they're right in the same room. And I've got multiple cameras so I can show them my hands, my pedaling, and from different angles. And I've got a really high-end microphone that goes right in my button here, and a microphone inside the Steinway so they can hear and I can hear. And it's great. I love it, and I do it right from here. You did this once before, and I mentioned to you how you have to be very deliberate where the recapitulation deviates from the exposition, and you skipped to the recap, take a look at the score so you can solidify your memory. Up to this point, by the way, your memory has been exceptionally solid. So notice the first time, if you look at the vivace, the second line, seventh measure of the second line, seventh measure of the second line of the vivace. And you have and then it's a C pickup at the end of that measure. Do you see where I'm talking about? It works out beautifully. And because of the videos, people discover me, and I offer free interviews to people to make sure it's a good fit.
What would you tell people who feel like much of music education or education in general benefits from the presence of being in the same room? You've got this set up. Can you still accomplish everything that you want?
You know, someone, for example, in Alaska, how many top-notch teachers are going to be within a drivable distance? Or my student I have just one student in Pakistan. Do you think there's a lot of piano? You know, there's no piano tuners in Pakistan, much less teachers. Once a year, somebody comes in from another country to tune pianos there. So there are areas that just don't have teachers. The other thing is developing the right relationship. You know, the first question I ask every student who comes to me, if they study with other people, which the vast majority of them have, is, has anybody ever shown you how to practice? I have yet to have an affirmative answer to that question, which is, on a surface, seems shocking. But when you consider that, it's not just piano. Think about in public school when the teacher would say, now you must write a paper, and the whole class would break into a cold sweat. Why? Because nobody ever showed us how to write a paper. I'm thankful to this day to Mr. Gray, an 11th grader, showed us how to craft an English composition, because all of my videos have accompanying articles. I do a tremendous amount of writing. And it's certainly true with piano. They'll say, now go and practice. They may show certain tips of this or that. You can do, slow practice or this. But what I do with students, which I think is the most important thing that any teacher can ever do with students, is to practice with the student. Honing in their practice skills, because no matter how brilliant a teacher may be, it's the work a student does on a daily basis that's going to make the difference in their progress. So that is job number one, to make students productive and efficient in the work they do. So that's one of the reasons people study with me. Now, they watch my videos, and after starting to watch one or two or three, they start binge watching. They feel they get a sense of who I am and what I offer, and they feel comfortable studying. I can hear what I need to hear. I can see, and they can't believe that I can see all the fingering as long as the camera's up at the right angle. I can hear and see everything. They can see and hear me. I can show them my hands from various angles, and it works great.
I've heard you play piano on your many different instruments in person, so I have a sense of what your tonal palette is like. When you're teaching, do you think that comes across through the virtual medium such that they can perceive it, and then with their setup, what comes back to you?
The vast majority of the time, yes. Now, there's some exceptions. The biggest problem is when people don't have a fast enough internet connection, and that is just kills everything. Because if the internet connection isn't fast enough, the video gets choppy, the audio gets compromised, and it could be a nightmarish situation. And fortunately, when I speak with students about this, unless they're in an area where they don't have, my student in Alaska, the first year or so when she studied with me, there was no internet in her area, and it was just tethering to her phone, and it was pretty awful. But she finally got good internet. Otherwise, sometimes, for example, I will be doing something where I'm talking about tone in a very advanced way, and I will play two different samples of playing a passage, whether I'm using the arm weight to project the fluidity of a melody, or I'm playing it just with, floppy fingers, calculating from note to note without the analog of the breath with the arm weight. And I'll ask them, can you hear the difference? And they always say yes. They can hear the difference. With Zoom, you have to make sure to disable original sound or it kills the audio. It doesn't require anything fancy as long as you have a modern device and a stable, decent internet connection. I've got everything I need to hear what they're doing and vice versa.
If we're trying to reach people virtually on a global scale and we're producing 2 or 3 videos per week, doesn't it also start to become a question of feeling like my work needs to reach a certain number of people in order for me to feel like my work is valid? Wouldn't it be that each of your videos is a question of how many views am I getting, and therefore am I feeling boosted by a sense of audience or approval?
Early on, like anybody with a fledgling YouTube channel, it was just very few views. And, you could feel like you're throwing your art to the wind at first. Not to mention the fact when you're starting out, if any of you are starting out on YouTube, don't be discouraged by trolls. At the very beginning, people will be nasty. But then eventually, you gain validity and respect of your viewers. Now, here's the thing. Just like songwriters or composers will sometimes try to second guess what will sell. And you know what? That never works because you have to stay true to yourself, and that's the most important thing. And I can tell you that I can never second guess which videos are going to hit, way above average and which ones are not going to go very far. It's completely, you can't determine it no matter what. It's crazy. The algorithms have a mind of their own. And if you try to second guess it, you can just drive you nuts. I recommend just doing what you want to do, what you feel passionate about. And that really gives you the best hope of being able to be successful in getting audience. And you know what, if you don't, and if it's something really important to you, the people you do reach will be gratifying because it's an important message that you want to share with people.
And what kind of impact are you hoping to have on your audiences? Or is that an extension of what you just said, that maybe it doesn't matter, you just put it out there?
Really, it's keeping piano alive in the 21st century and keeping it relevant in people's lives. That's really my mission. I was so lucky enough to grow up surrounded by pianists and pianos and, being with my father at his recording sessions and getting to try his pianos at Lincoln Center and Carnegie Hall before his performances and meeting composers and pianists, from Rubinstein to Horowitz to De La Rocha and just on and on. And, for me, it's my whole life. And to be able to share it with people and have people care. And if I can affect young people and old people alike, I have students from kids all the way up. My oldest student's 89 years old, and to bring this kind of joy to people and for them to spread it to other people, this is thrilling for me,
So why do you think it is that people are going to you, whether it be for a piano or for lessons, rather than going to wherever they happen to be in the world, having an in-person teacher, or buying a piano that's in their town rather than shipping it across the country? Why do you think that is?
Well, I'm going to digress for a moment because the question people really ask me are about how we sell pianos, many of them 100-year-old restored pianos, from someone they've never met and a piano they've never played. Now, that's even more remarkable when you consider it. And yet, we've been doing this since 2006. And even in Southern California, over 84% of the pianos we sold were to people who didn't visit. And you might wonder how this can be, because a person like you or myself would never think of buying a piano for ourselves that we didn't try.
Exactly.
Why?
Exactly.
Because we've played vast numbers of pianos and have a very keen idea of exactly what we're after. Whereas most people don't have that frame of reference. And even if they did, the challenge of playing a piano in one location with one acoustic and another location with different acoustics is almost insurmountable, even for people like ourselves. And for people who don't have a realm of experience, maybe they had a piano growing up and they're playing on an upright or a digital now, and they don't even know what really to look for. And what we provide for them are not only descriptions and pictures and information, but really super high quality videos with high fidelity audio where they can listen to what they connect with. And they watch my videos where I have on a vast range of subjects, and they feel confident that they're making the right decision. And in many cases, we get an email relationship going, sometimes phone calls. And, we've been selling pianos like this since 2006. And to my knowledge, every single person we've sold pianos to is happy. So it works. I feel very fortunate that I have this vehicle, that I can do this, because if I was just, capitalizing on my local market here in Cleveland or even in Southern California where we were for 20 years, it's still a limited base, And to be able to open up to the world is thrilling. We've sold pianos to China, Singapore, all over the world. And my students are in, a dozen countries. And you have to cast a wide net when you're dealing with a niche. And classical piano is a niche market, let's face it.
And finally, Robert, I wanted to ask you, because I want more people to know about him, what was the essence of your father's musicality, and what was his influence on you as a musician?
My father, of anyone in this world, has had more influence on me than anyone, and not just in music, on life. And he was such a great educator in everything. I mean, what I learned from him is no way I can even begin to describe it. But his teaching, he had a way of breaking things down to essential elements and essential building blocks. So everything was additive and setting a solid foundation, whether it was in piano playing or music theory or even how an internal combustion engine operated. I mean, everything was just so succinct. He was an amazing communicator and a voice. I wish I inherited his voice. I mean, he had this bossa voice. He would demonstrate for people he could sing down to the lowest note on the piano with a full voice. It was unbelievable. As a performer, his range of tone, I mean, he had enormous hands. He used to do this to me, where he would, he could reach, he played, all the preludes of Rachmaninoff on performance at Lincoln Center. And, the D-flat prelude that ends the Opus 32 has a 5-note D-flat major chord that Rachmaninoff was crazy enough to write for people with hands as big as his. And my father could reach that chord, D-flat, F, A-flat, D-flat, F. 5-note chord from bottom to top. Boom! Can you imagine that?
I've only met one person who could play that.
And yet, the delicacy he could play with was unparalleled. Listen online, his G major Opus 32 prelude. Or I posted the Symphonic Etudes of Schumann and that slow movement. Unbelievable delicacy. The power, of course, he had this enormous sound. So he had tremendous dynamic range and control, and his whole mode of teaching was all about memory, how to memorize. People think that it just comes to you, that, and people, I sometimes watch videos of people explaining how to memorize, and after 20 minutes, my mind is spinning and I have no idea what they're talking about, because they are so sophisticated that they've figured out how a piece is constructed. But if you have somebody who's not on that level, it makes very little benefit to them unless you already are on that level. But my father, from the very beginning, taught me, just like he taught all his other students, how to memorize. There's no magic. It's just a formula that a method of point by point that anybody can memorize. You don't have to be a genius to memorize scores of music. You just have to know how to approach the art of memorizing, the skill of memorizing. So Great teacher, phenomenal musician, and I learned more from him than all my other teachers combined in every single subject.
Robert, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I truly admire your ways, all of them, for reaching the world.
And I have such a deep respect for what you bring to the world with your channel and so appreciate being a part of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
All right.
Thanks.